The regular monthly board meeting of the Ambridge Area School District Board of Directors on Wednesday, September 15, 2021 is now called to order. Flag salute, please rise. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. This meeting is being recorded for district purposes. It is or may be published in part or in its entirety on the district's website without the express permission of meeting participants. Can I have a roll call, please?
Mr. Angus?
Here.
Mr. Campolone? Mrs. Kehoe?
Here.
Dr. Manganello?
Here.
Mr. Metz?
Here.
Ms. Pedigo? Here. Ms. Young? Mrs. Fisher?
Here.
Ms. Curtis? 6 present, or 7 present, sorry.
Thank you. Can I have the sunshine law, please?
The Board of School Directors held an executive session on Wednesday, September 15th to discuss personnel matters, information, strategy, and/or negotiation session relating to the negotiation of collective bargaining agreement, matters subject to attorney-client privilege and other confidentiality laws, litigation or threatened litigation matters.
Any correspondence this evening?
No correspondence.
Thank you. I have a motion to accept or correct the minutes of the Wednesday, August 11th meet and discuss voting meeting, Wednesday, August 11th meet and discuss non-voting meeting, and Wednesday, August 18th board meeting.
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Angus. Second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Metz. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? The next motion, Dr. Pasquarella, can I ask you to touch on this for the minute for the treasurer's report?
Yeah, about the treasurer's report, did you
Yes.
say why we don't have one?
Yes, correct.
Yeah, so our business office is awaiting some things from the tax collectors, and that's why it's not present at this given time. When they gain all of that information, then they will have it for you to vote on next month. Is that right?
Yeah, whenever it's ready, we'll get it on the agenda for the board.
Moving forward to the amendments, addendums to the agenda, approval of the agenda this evening.
Yes, Madam President, I have one on personnel, item number 6. We need to fill in the blanks. The name should be Marcy Adams, and it should be at the top step of their scale.
Thank you. Do I have a so moved?
So.
Mr. Metz? Second?
Second.
It's hard to hear us? I apologize. Get a little closer to the microphone. Who's second? Dr. Manganello, second. Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Thank you. We have no recognitions, presentations this evening. Moving forward to public comment regarding agenda items only. At this time, district residents may come forward to comment on agenda items only. Each person must state their first and last name and address prior to speaking. Each resident will be allowed 3 minutes and can speak only once. This period for public comment prior to the standing committee reports will be limited to 1/2 hour. Although not required, board members desiring to address questions or concerns may do so after the residents' comments questions or at the conclusion of the committee reports. There will still be an opportunity for residents to comment on any business relevant to the Ambridge Area School District under old and new business at the end of the meeting.
Hi, Desiree Conrad, Ambridge. Under steering and rules, if Mrs. Kehoe could elaborate on what's going to happen there, because, I mean, from what I see, it just looks like you're replacing something the same new with the same old with something new. If we could elaborate what's going to go on there, and if there's going to be any legal and binding obligations from instituting Act 65 to the school and what that does. And I want to ask the board, have you all been briefed on Act 65 and gone through it and know what's going to do, you know, in regards to that before we go and vote on it? I would just ask the board members if they've researched that at all. Thank you.
Do you want to? I'm happy. Okay, go ahead.
So Act 65 is an amendment to the Sunshine Law. It went into effect, I believe, August 29th, 2021, so it's brand new. They are new elements to the Sunshine Law that relate largely to the posting of the agenda and what types of new business can be added outside of that posted agenda at an actual public meeting. I think the idea is to truly increase transparency. To be honest, I believe Ambridge has historically posted the agenda in a pretty solid form in advance of meetings, but there are lots of other places in the world where the Sunshine Law applies, little authorities, municipalities, other types of governmental agencies, where that happened much less often. And where you would have new business sort of come up on the fly, like in the course of a meeting. That is much more difficult now with Act 65. So I believe that the policy speaks to when that agenda needs to be posted, confirms that it needs to be both on the district's website as well as posted at a physical location at the district where the meetings are going to be held. Once the agenda is set and posted in advance, the board or the governing body has limited opportunities to add new business that is outside of the agenda. They can do, so there are exceptions. So you can do so with the majority vote, and we are doing, that's kind of what we've always had built into our particular, even built into our agenda. And so that's why you see that happen in advance of public comment. And the idea there is that whatever the business is going to be, it's set at the very beginning prior to public comment so that the public knows what will, in fact, will be presented that evening and gives everyone an opportunity to comment on it prior to the vote happening. The other exceptions, you're allowed to add new business or voting items if it's de minimis in nature, so meaning that there isn't a contract or a financial obligation that is made through that action item. Sometimes those are recognitions or low-level proclamations. Those sorts of things can still be added and not be on the agenda. And I think for emergencies or business that arises sooner than 24 hours in advance of the voting meeting. When new business is added, there's a new obligation on the part of the board secretary to post the updated agenda to reflect actually all of the business that happened at the voting meeting shortly afterwards. So even if it wasn't on there in the first place, if you have an exception or you're permitted to add it and you do so lawfully, you still have to post afterwards the updated agenda. So I believe that the policy kind of talks about the changes to the policy that are being considered this evening, speaks to those changes. Our office did prepare a memo for all of our clients and circulated that shortly after the law went into effect. So we've been talking about this with clients in advance, and I believe these policy changes are standard Pennsylvania School Boards Association changes in policies for the board's consideration this evening. Is there anything else?
Are you good with that, or you want to add to that, Mary Jo?
No, the only thing I wanted to add was it was just to update the existing policy due to the recent legislation. And we do get several of those a lot of times during the year. Sometimes it just may be a change of wording. But the board does have access to that prior to us voting.
Hi, my name is Rachel from Baden, 223 State, Baden. Who decides the de minimis?
I believe that is, at this point, because we don't have case law or regulations or anything from the Office of Open Records to help us figure out what is de minimis, although I do think that there's language that talks about and that's why I referenced it. I think expenditures, contracts, I mean, if it's anything of that nature, it needs to be on the agenda in advance. And I think that would be difficult for that to be considered de minimis. Other than that, I think we just have to feel our way through and try to be as respectful of the intent and the purpose of the Sunshine Law as we can. I think that's typically solved, at least here in Ambridge, with the way that we address the agenda and make those changes in advance. And I think what you would see is I don't think the 3 or 4 years I've been here, we've ever just had a motion from the floor on the part of the school board in the course of a meeting, or certainly not very often. But if we were to do that, I think we would pause and try to figure out how to do that lawfully.
Go ahead.
Desiree Conrad, Ambridge. I read what they have put out so far, and in regards to the de minimis, all it states is, so in you, I agree with you, that's all that I saw in there, is it's basically like, the only thing that they have mentioned is the budget and like very minimal stuff. So my question is who's gonna decide whether an issue raised during a meeting is important enough to include it on the new budget? Or I'm sorry, on the agenda. See what I'm saying? Because I need to know who's deciding that, who's gonna have the ultimate say-so of whether, if you could have, hundreds of parents showing up over something, and you're going to say, well, it's not, I don't have to list it on here. So my question, I shouldn't say that it's a question. I should say that it's concerning to me that you can have, there's legislation going in to alter codes and law that's going to essentially give the board freedom to say, well, that wasn't important enough to put that on there, or that's not important enough to put on the agenda for another date. Do you see what I'm saying? Thank you.
Megan, anything can be addressed under old and new business as long as it's in reference to the district.
Yes, our practice of having the agenda amended at the beginning of the meeting, I think that's always been honestly, I think that's always been a good practice. I hear what you're saying about it. Functionally possibly slowing down the speed of business. In the grand scheme of things, I think Harrisburg thought that actually was a good idea, so that people would have advance notice of what was going to happen at a public meeting, and they would have an opportunity to check that out and decide if it was important for them to show up. So I think there are equities on both sides. I don't believe that, so the other thing is it doesn't say that the amendment to the agenda has to happen at the beginning of the meeting. I don't believe that the board is necessarily hamstrung to do so. In order to fully comply with the Sunshine Law, should the board in the middle of a meeting wish to add an item, we'd have to do two things. One, there would have to be a vote to amend the agenda, and a majority would have to approve that. Two, prior to them actually taking, a vote or deliberating, we'd have to pause and probably have a limited public comment on that one item to allow, because the Sunshine Law requires that public comment must be permitted on all voting items prior to action. So could it be orchestrated? It could be. It definitely could be orchestrated, even in a, that's perhaps not quite as graceful, but there is a way to do that. I think complying with the Sunshine Law and Act 65, as well as, So I think there's a way to do it if the board ever wished to in the midst of a meeting.
Okay. Anybody else? All right, moving forward to committee reports, Education and Technology, Dr. Manganello.
Thank you, Mrs. President. I move for the adoption of items 1 through 3 on education and technology.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Metz. Can I have a roll call, please?
Mr. Angus?
Yes.
Ms. Kehoe?
Yes.
Dr. Manganello?
Yes.
Mr. Metz?
Yes.
Ms. Pettigo?
Yes.
Mrs. Fisher?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you. Finance and Budget, Ms. Pettigo.
Thank you, Mrs. President. I have 7 items this evening, so I'm going to move for the adoption of items 1 through 7 under Finance and Budget.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Dr. Manganello. Can I have a roll call, please?
Mr. Angus?
Yes.
Mrs. Kehoe?
Yes.
Dr. Manganello?
Yes.
Mr. Metz?
Yes.
Ms. Pettigo?
Yes.
Mrs. Fisher?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Building and Grounds, Mr. Angus.
Yes, this evening we have 3 items under Building and Grounds, and I move for the adoption of items 1 through 3 as presented.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mrs. Kehoe. Can I have a roll call, please?
Mr. Angus?
Yes.
Mrs. Kehoe?
Yes.
Dr. Manganello?
Yes.
Mr. Metz?
Yes.
Ms. Pettigo?
Yes.
Mrs. Fisher?
Yes.
Motion carries.
We have nothing to report in athletics this evening. Public Relations, Mr. Metz.
Nothing at this time.
Steering and Rules, Mrs. Kehoe.
I'd like to move for the adoption of items 1 and 2.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Dr. Manganello. Can I have a roll call, please?
Mr. Angus?
Yes.
Mrs. Kehoe?
Yes.
Dr. Manganello?
Yes.
Mr. Metz?
Yes.
Ms. Pettigo?
Yes.
Mrs. Fisher?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Legislative, we have nothing to report this evening. Mrs. Kehoe, could you take Salary, Schedule, and Labor Relations, please?
Yes, I'd like to move for the adoption of items 1 through 4.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Metz. Roll call, please.
Mr. Angus?
Yes.
Mrs. Kehoe?
Yes.
Dr. Manganello?
Yes.
Mr. Metz?
Yes.
Ms. Pettigo?
Yes.
Mrs. Fisher?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Personnel, Mr. Angus.
Yes, this evening I move for the adoption of items 1 through 8 as amended earlier.
Thank you. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Metz. Can I have a roll call, please?
Mr. Angus?
Yes.
Mrs. Kehoe?
Yes.
Dr. Manganello?
Yes.
Mr. Metz?
Yes.
Ms. Pettigo?
Yes.
Mrs. Fisher?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you. Moving forward to the solicitor's report, Solicitor Turnbull, as discussed, could we
Sure.
speak about a few issues?
So I'm actually going to read a communication that the district received on Friday. We could have done this under correspondence, but chose to kind of hold it here. I anticipate that there will be reaction or questions possibly during old and new business, but we'll just ask that those hold briefly. So this was a communication sent to all schools in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania on Friday, September 10th, 2021 at 2:12 p.m. The subject, brief updates ahead of the weekend. Dear Chief School Administrator, I hope this letter finds you, your family, and community safe and your schools secure. The start of the school year has been extraordinarily challenging, and your continued leadership is appreciated. A few brief updates ahead of the weekend. Late yesterday, President Biden announced a series of additional federal measures to help bring the pandemic under control. The Pennsylvania Department of Education, PDE, and our partners in the Pennsylvania Department of Health and Pennsylvania Department of Human Services are working to digest the path out of the pandemic action plan, its implications for the Commonwealth, including our personnel who work under federal programs, and our next steps in implementing the rule. On Wednesday, PDE issued a communication to a school district that has exhibited significant noncompliance with the Acting Secretary of Health's face covering order. While this letter responds to a specific set of circumstances in a single school entity, the cautions and conditions are broadly applicable to all school entities, both public and non-public. Relatedly, this order is not a mask optional policy. Any school entity simply permitting a parent sign off without evidence that the student has a medical or mental health condition or disability that precludes the wearing of a face covering is not in compliance with the order. Under the order, and as set forth in PDE's answers to FAQs, school entities must require all individuals 2 years of age and older to wear face coverings unless the individual has a medical or mental health condition or disability that precludes the wearing of a face covering. In accordance with Section 3 of the order, before an individual is accepted from the order, all alternatives to a face covering, including a face shield, are to be exhausted. It is recommended that any exception be in accordance with the eligibility under Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act or IDEA for such medical or mental health condition or disability. School entities should follow their established processes for determining student eligibility under those laws, including any medical documentation that they would normally require. There are exceptions to the order, however, a parent's opposition to the order is not one of them. Thank you for your continuing efforts during this challenging time. Sherry L. Smith, Doctorate of Education, Acting Deputy Secretary, Department of Education. And this follows a communication that I think many schools became aware of from last Wednesday. I do believe that it's available on PDE's website, and it is the cautionary letter to another school district who was acting outside of the bounds as at least determined by PDE. So we continue to watch these communications for other agencies. You know, they inform the way we approach, and all schools are approaching this issue of masking. But certainly we continue to be open and encouraging of families to present any medical information along with requests that they may have. And from what I understand, those requests have been continue to come in, and we work through those as best we can in all circumstances. Do you have any questions?
Does the board have any?
How are we planning on treating extracurricular activities? So I know we've been through mask mandates before. One of the things that I'm just curious is what's our process now that we have more sports in the building? For example, I was at the volleyball game last night because my child plays volleyball, and there was definitely a lack of compliance. What's the school's liability in that situation? I mean, children, visitors, parents, some of them were not wearing masks.
My understanding from what I read in the mandate, if you're playing the athletic event, you wouldn't. Can you guys hear me okay? Okay. I just wanted to make sure. My understanding was that if you were actually participating in the activity, that you would not have to wear a mask in physical education, lunch, and sports activities. As far as visitors, indoor, I think I was underneath the impression, and I don't know if it specifically stated it, that indoor visitors at any time would need to wear a mask.
It isn't, yeah.
So I'm not, can you just, for my knowledge, was it the athletes or?
No, spectators.
Okay, so we will need to, remind folks of that.
I think reminders are really important, the signs at the door today. I don't think anyone is in love with the situation that we're in, obviously, but I think we've got to monitor it or do our part to reinforce that. So.
And I think that's, I think that's a reasonable approach. I think that's consistent with the way that most schools, including Ambridge, have at least treated this with students and staff. And so you don't usually go from 0 to 10 in terms of a reaction. I think just those gradual and those human interactions are probably what will best serve everyone. Okay. And then that concludes my report. I have no action items for the board's consideration.
Thank you. Superintendent's report, Dr. Pasquarello?
Yeah, I had 2 items. The first one, just to clarify, we went over some things and the board weighed in on those, but one clarification, and I think I know the answer, so I don't think it really takes a vote, but if anyone objects to this, then let me know. But The discussion in and around, we know that students are switching for their specials in the elementary. Well, in the upper elementary grades, kids used to switch for classes, and then we had the teacher switch for classes. So I didn't want to make an assumption, so we haven't started that yet, but my assumption was that, and that's why I'm bringing it up to you, if you have an issue, let me know, that those students would be able to switch in the upper levels going from class to class as well. If somebody objects to that, let me know. In other words, they would switch for reading or math instead of the teacher themselves switching. I'm not saying that that's what I'm recommending. I'm saying that that was my understanding when we allowed people to use it, so I didn't want to assume that because we didn't specifically discuss it.
Any issues from the board on that at all?
No.
Go ahead, Ms. Pettigo.
No.
No? Did you
No
say
issue.
no? I
No
apologize.
issues.
I couldn't hear you.
Okay, so I will just assume that you guys are in agreement that that also pertains to the upper grade switching classes. Okay. And I'll let the principals know. Just give me 1 second. Also, I wanted to apologize, but also take the opportunity to introduce our new Director of Finance, Ms. Beth Ann Eath. If you would like to come up to the podium. She comes to us with a wealth of experience, and we're looking forward to her joining our team. Well, she's joined our team, and looking forward to her working with us in our school district. She's going to take the lead on all district operations in and around the finance department, and also in and around transportation as well. So welcome again officially. Just wanted to introduce you at the public board meeting, and if you had anything you'd like to say, even briefly, please feel free to do so.
Beth Ann Eith. It's EYTH. It's a little strange, but I just want to say that I'm really looking forward to this opportunity, and I'm very excited about working in the Ambridge Area School District, and really looking forward to the future.
Thank you.
Welcome to the district, Beth Ann.
That concludes my report.
I did have one question, Dr. Prasarella, before. We talked a lot about activities for the next few months, and I did get a couple inquiries on Santa shops at the elementary school. So I did want to address that with the board and see if there were any comments there. You can speak first.
My way in right now is there is some categorizing, I think. In other words, if we were saying okay to book fairs in a limited amount, being indoors with it, that we would be allowing things like Santa shop. I mean, that would be my take on that from what your direction was. If I'm wrong there, you could correct me, but I think those would be things that we would plan with the idea of, again, saying that if things for some reason progressed not in a positive way, that we would have to revisit it. But at this given point, I think those types of activities that we're allowing, with protocols put in place to try to limit the number of people in those areas while they're conducting business, would be beneficial.
Thank you. Any other board feedback on that? No? Okay. Excuse me. Moving forward to old and new business, it is now time for old and new business. Any district resident who desires to comment on any business relevant to the Ambridge Area School District should now come forward. Each person must state their first and last name and address prior to speaking. Each person will be allowed 3 minutes and can speak only once.
Hi, Desiree Conrad from Ambridge. I have a lot to go over, so I'm going to try to fit this all in. So the solicitor was talking about a letter that came out today in regards to clarifying the law in the sections of 3B and so on and so forth. I just have to say that I find it very curious that the health department acting secretary is not a doctor. She's not a doctor. She's an attorney. She has no medical expertise and no medical history, no grounds. So she's making these laws. I find it very odd and peculiar that she would go through a whole mandate and look at that. I'm a Joe Schmo. I'm a nobody. I read through that and saw just loophole after loophole after loophole after inconsistency. It was not clear. It was not precise. And I just don't understand how, as an attorney, that she could read through that and not know that that was going to cause a problem. So now there's these letters come. So she's that to me says that's either two things. Number one, she's not a well-equipped attorney and I would never hire her. Or number two, it's purposeful. So which one is it? Both alarm me, very, very much so. There was another letter that was sent out. I don't know if any of the other parents have read this or know about it, or if the board, the Department of Public Education sent out at least they post, I don't know if they sent it, but they sent it, they posted it to their page. And it was basically addressing board members and directors. And they stated that if you voted to go against the mandate, if you did not enforce the mandate, I have it right here for anybody who wants to read it. It's a real thing. But they just said that you would lose your immunity and you are subject to be personally sued. That's terrifying for you. And I want to mention under 42 Pennsylvania, let me see, I have it right here. I pulled it up right here. Under Pennsylvania 42-8550. In that, I'm going to read it real quick. In any action against a local agency or employee thereof for damages on account of an injury caused by the act of an employee in which it is judicially determined that the act of the employee caused the injury and that such act is constituted a crime, actual fraud, actual malice, or willful misconduct, the provisions of let's get down to this. They're going to have to prove in court, but by a judge is going to have to determine that you personally are accountable for putting a kid in harm's way for an invisible virus. They go home. They go out to the grocery store. They go everywhere. Furthermore, kids just get sick sometimes. How many people do you know who live in their home and said, we did everything right? We masked, we washed hands, we socially distanced, we just stayed away from everybody, and we still got sick. And they're threatening that a judge is going to determine that? There's nobody in the world who can determine that. But I'll tell you what. The one who created the eye will see who's done what in their chambers. I know that. I don't know how I am on time here, but again, here's the bill. These agencies hold on to your kids' records for 10 years. And you want to go and create a 504 for a potential. And you know what I also find alarming? I find it very alarming that we're always giving these stats on COVID, masks keeping the COVID numbers down. Maybe they do. That's wonderful, that's great. But they never, ever go into what they cause. And the numbers for tooth decay, cavities, Legionnaire's disease, impetigo, pneumonia, are skyrocketing. Talk to anybody. I mean, they're going up. So I just don't understand. Furthermore, let me just put it this way. I feel bad to be put in a position to be threatened by the Department of Education that you're going to be personally held liable for something invisible. That to me is insane. So, and June, can you let the record show? I still haven't gotten an email from you.
I was just going to address that.
Yeah.
Here, Solicitor Turnbull is going to talk about that.
Okay, perfect.
So I did go through your questions.
Okay, do you want, other people probably have time, like want to ask questions, so I don't want to take their time away. So if you can get that to me afterwards.
No, she's going to address it publicly here now.
So I'm going to answer the questions.
Are you answering the questions taking time away from the rest of?
I will allow the time. I will allow people.
Time.
Yes.
I don't. So the ones that I'm going to address are going to be the ones, let me go through the ones that,
Let me get my questions.
I'll read the question and the answer. I'm going to focus on the ones that we did not address last week, and also the ones that are more, like more legal questions, rather than district position ones, because I think that's more appropriate.
I want to say another thing. I appreciate all of you. I hope tonight I've been going 90 miles an hour all day, so I'm full of energy. I don't want me to come across as aggressive. I'm just full of energy tonight. So,
and I don't think anybody thinks you're being.
No, I just don't want anyone to feel, and I actually am on your side about this. So I just want to make that clear to any of the board members, the superintendent, you guys are great, so.
Thank you for that. Appreciate it.
And I'll preface my answers in that I am not, as a lawyer, defending either what the Department of Education is doing, what the Department of Health is doing. What I'm trying to do is you've given me questions, and for me to respond in the best lawyery way that I can, which may be unsatisfying.
You know how lawyers are hard.
I know.
Just give it to us.
Okay, so let me go with what I had jotted down. So one of your questions that was truly legal in nature refers to Pennsylvania statute Title 23, Section 63 under CPS subchapter, a preliminary provision states 1998 Amendment Act 127 subsection B 6303 definition subsection 2 that B period 1. Child abuse shall mean intentionally, knowingly, or recklessly doing any of the following acts. And then you kind of drop down to one of those parts of the definition, which is subsection 5 of that. And the language in the statute is interfering with the breathing of a child. And your question, doesn't this conflict with Section 4, Part C of the Health Department's mandate? So Section 4, Part C is language that says at the very end of this order that we keep talking about, that talks about how this order cannot be in conflict with any other law or discrimination. There's discrimination.
And that's a common thing. I think that I only gave one example. There's plenty more where it conflicts, but I just gave one.
Okay, so I responded to the one.
Yeah.
And so my answer to the question of whether it's a conflict, so my answer is no. And this is why. So the law that you refer to is the Child Protective Services Law. That's the name of that law. The purpose of that law, it is all geared towards making kind of identifying under the law who is a mandated reporter for child abuse and how you go about doing that and under what circumstances. And so the Child Protective Services Law requires that a mandated reporter, if they reasonably believe there is child abuse, they must report it to Childline or to the official places. So that is the mechanism and that is the purpose of that law. And so I say it's not a conflict because there's definitions of child abuse, of serious bodily injury, lots of different definitions in that law. But the law doesn't ultimately tell us that child abuse, it doesn't prove what is child abuse for criminal purposes or for civil purposes. It creates an obligation to report something that you think might be child abuse. So I agree that the child abuse definition for the purposes of that law talks about the restraints, but because it doesn't create an affirmative duty to prevent or to the restraint or the obstruction of breathing, it's not a direct conflict. Now, I can see where one informs the other, but in terms just of like a strict conflict where I think that section 4C of this order that we're talking about, I don't think so. Now, could a court or could someone disagree with me? Yes, and if they do, then we would go otherwise. I shepherdized, meaning like I looked up that section of the Child Protective Services law to see if there are any cases that define it or any other cases that use either that section or one of the child abuse definitions to be used in that manner, and I don't see any Pennsylvania laws. Now, the Child Protective Services law is from 2018, so we should have 3 years of case law that would help inform it. So I don't, as that secondary place where I would look to see legal authority, I don't see it. So that's my law school. I mean, it's a law school question in a way, but that's my answer.
I have to, like, to elaborate on that, like, I am a mandated reporter. And I'm in the field. And I think it's very different for people who, if you're not working with kids every day, and you're not doing the day-to-day, you're not quite understanding what constitutes as child abuse. So if a child has a mask on and they choke, and I can't tell because they have a mask on, whose fault is it? Mine. That's a liability for me. When I see a child huffing and puffing and about to pass out because they have a mask on, and they're struggling and whatnot, they need the mask taken off. They need fresh air. To me, that's abuse. Like that's abusive. Now, I'm not going to say that. I think that's a scale like this. We can go back and forth all day long, but. I'm just going to end it right there, but I'm just going to say that is a gray area, and I don't feel strongly enough that it's not abuse. Okay. Abusive. And that's the sad thing is we shouldn't have to go back and forth about this because we could pick people apart all day long, and I'm not in that nature. I don't. So I will listen to your next.
Okay, and I certainly would expect and hope and that in the event that anyone in a school building, if they saw another person, adult, especially child, having difficulties, they would take the mask off that child. I don't think that there's, and probably work
some
through
people
it.
are very fearful.
Okay.
Yeah, I see a lot of people who are very, very fearful, so I don't know.
Okay. Well, and I'm just a lawyer, so I
Right,
guess that,
I know.
Another question, can the solicitor provide us with their interpretation of the word would, W-O-U-L-D, just as it is used in Section 3B of the Health Department's mandate? And I looked at that, I read it, so my response is, would appears to be used here in its ordinary and customary usage. Merriam-Webster's online dictionary, which lawyers in courts, we do sometimes just
right. You have
turn
legal
to the
definitions
dictionary,
defines
the word would in the following manner, past tense of will, which I had to think about for a little while and then kept on moving to the examples.
Is it the past tense or is it the future tense?
Merriam-Webster says it's the past tense of will, which, again, the more I thought about that, it was difficult for me to wrap my head around. But it also said maybe used in various auxiliary functions. So you look at it and then it gives other examples. And so here I believe the word would is used to, and it follows note 4, to express probability or presumption in past or present time, which ultimately for legal purposes, the word would is not, that's not the operative word in that section. For me, to be honest, I think it's
just illegitimate.
It is a nondescript, not super helpful
then why put it in
verb, right? I don't know.
I mean, this is just questions I have. Like, why would you just,
I don't know.
an attorney drafted this, you know
I
what
was
I mean?
not in that room. I did not let
This is crazy. This is crazy here.
I know. Question, did House Bill
I'm taking crazy pills.
Did House Bill 854 allow any Ambridge employee or board member to enter into a contract with the health department? And if so, can that contract be made public? If it is already public, where can residents view it? So upon information belief, the district, separate from House Bill 584, the district has no contract with the State Department of Health.
But what the question is did House Bill 854 open the door for contracts to be made?
I don't think so. When I looked at House Bill 854, which looks to me like it was signed into law in
March 2021.
I think it was introduced. I thought it was finally signed in like June, but regardless of when.
April 6th.
When I looked at that law, it to me read like I had not read that before, and that in part is because I don't think it applies. I don't think it really is applicable to school districts, municipalities, or local.
But if you look at the definitions, did you look at the definitions? It says the definition shall be the health department, and the agency shall be the health department, and then it says, the executive agency.
So I think
an office, a department, anyone that enters into a contract with the policy, supervision, and control of the governor.
And so, I saw that law to be speaking to the to the executive branch of our state government, and then through those agencies, anyone that they contracted with, I think, is the contractor component of it. I honestly can't think of a time where the district would contract for services or other things with.
Because we're in unprecedented
really
times, right?
With the Department of Health. Although if any school district did so, I don't think it's barred by the school code. I just can't think of a logical reason why
I don't think the school could come up with they would have never known to come up with a code because no one imagined nothing like this existed before. Maybe it did maybe in a small sense, but this is an extended period of time, 10 years for the health department to hold on to documents.
And those were, I think those were COVID related.
That's any COVID related documents we held on for 10 years, guys.
Yeah.
So they can pull it up. Because I pose this because say your child graduates from school here in coming years and they go for a job. Do you know where those those documents are going with the databases? And it shows up that your child has a pre-existing condition and now is denied insurance? That's not right. What happened in school?
The only thing I will say that I want to add just for informational purposes is that any medical records that are received by the school district or are considered, those are protected by FERPA. So there is no legal disclosure.
And I'm just saying, I know.
Okay.
And like I said, we can go back, like I said, we can go back and forth, but there's just no data, there's no database to exchange that information yet. And that's just what I think is everyone thinks they're safe, and we just keep being told here's this little mile marker we have to meet, and we meet it, and then they're like, oh no, and then now you have this, and then they just keep slamming us with legislation, slamming us. Yeah. So that's what I'm saying is it's not there yet. I don't know that it won't be. Yeah. But go ahead.
You asked the question also, why are parents not allowed to use religious and personal exemptions for the health department's mask order to remain compliant with Title I funding and only medical exemptions being accepted under Section 504? The email contained a link which is referring to Dr. Pascarella's email. However, when clicked on it, states that the page doesn't exist. So as I understand and kind of process these questions, this is what I wrote. The district is processing exemptions identified in Section 3 of that order. And so there are A through G in terms of exemptions. Now, most of those don't apply to students necessarily, but there are there are a series of them, including, that's where we get the okay or the leniency to remove masks while eating and drinking.
Okay.
Is one of, that's in those exemptions, as well
Okay.
as gym and other time and strenuous activities. So we kind of, that's where we pull those times from. And then additionally, we add those mask breaks because we believe that is reasonable. And
Okay.
we haven't been told otherwise by any of this.
That's a whole separate conversation,
Right.
but I'll just blow over that.
Okay. So here's the thing. The order does not identify either a religious or a personal exemption. We have a separate statute in Pennsylvania about vaccines, and that law specifically says that there is a religious exemption. So that's kind of like the counterpoint in a way to this order. The applicable standard, legal standard, when we look at questions of constitutionality, assuming that there isn't a statute out there that directly applies to the question, so like a civil right, it would be a different example. You'd start with the statute, apply that standard and the test associated with it. So a lot of times when people have questions about constitutionality and a religious exemption, I think really springs from that type of authority. It's often the question is often posed relative to like the individual relative to the government. What courts do is they start from the perspective of really is the exercise of government, is that reasonable? Is it measured enough against whatever the right is? So there are
can't
these
infringe
right. So there are
upon personal beliefs.
And courts will say, depending on what the right is that we're talking about, they will have, there are different tests and different levels of scrutiny. Those are like the legal terms that go along with it. And so it's measured by, it's really whether the government has a legitimate non-discriminatory reason, and whether that outweighs the strength or the basis of the right being exerted.
If I have a question, if I had a religious reasoning to wear a mask, that would be accepted. But if I have a religious reasoning to not wear a mask, that's not accepted, just to be clear.
And I think, and again, this is not my rationale. I'm giving you just a generic constitutional analysis.
I know, but do you see what we're leaving parents with this, like, questions?
I think there are a lot of questions. The best place, there are two good places to solve that conflict, though. One is the courts, and that's why we see some people going to the courts, and we keep crossing our fingers that depending on how you feel about it and where you're starting as a position, you're kind of hoping that a court sees it your way. There will be courts who will start to decide these things. So that's one place. And then the other place, honestly, is your local and your state, like your state legislators. I mean, that's really the person, and I never talk about my own politics kind of in the role up here, but if I felt really strongly, that would be the person all those persons, right? Because I think that is where there's so much power, and that's where there is a place for immediate or very close to immediate relief. If you can convince enough people who have that power, then
that's the other problems too, is because we've talked to senators and representatives, and that the order that the acting secretary put through. First of all, there was two ways that she could do that. She could have the governor do it through legislation, which was not done. And number two, she could do it by I lost my train of thought here. She could do it through legislation, or they could do it through an emergency order, and neither of those were done. So the legislature, it's the logic of going in and filing not guilty to a traffic ticket when you were never giving a speeding ticket. What do we fight? There was no actual nothing put through legislation, and no emergency order that allowed them to put that order in for the 1955 Act. It's done, and in the 1955 Act, it says by law, they have to give an end date. This is whenever. This could be forever. There's no end date. That's the law. 1955, it says you have to give an end date of when this is going to end. There's no end in sight. What do I do? Lord have mercy on us.
Megan,
Sorry.
do you have a couple more?
I'm going to do one more.
Okay.
And I think it's
And in regards to your comment about, you are correct that there haven't been anything going in through, because I've been watching about the court hearings. But I mean, something similar would be the medical, in regards to medical law, Supreme Court of Law, Roe v. Wade. Nothing can infringe on your 14th Amendment, your right to life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness. Nothing can infringe on that. That's the Supreme Court law of the land.
Okay. Go ahead, Solicitor.
Okay, so the last one that I'm going to address is the Ambridge School District aware that House Bill 854, which revised the 1929 Act cited in the Health Department's mandate, stated COVID-19 was first discovered in Wuhan, China, and does the district agree with that statement? So Act 21 was signed in, and again, when I looked at it,
I thought that was really weird. Don't you think that's weird to put in there? It's very strange. It just struck me as weird. I was like, what is this?
I don't know what it is. All I can say is that the definition in that law was, and it looked to me like it was signed on June, like went fully and was signed by the governor on June 11th, 2021, at least the print version that I saw. Includes the following definition. COVID-19 is the defined term. The coronavirus disease, 2019, being an infectious disease caused by severe acute respiratory syndrome, coronavirus 2, that was first identified during December 2019 in Wuhan, China. So all I can say is that is the definition, at least in that law. I don't believe that the district has a position beyond.
Well, I mean, it's the law, right?
Yeah, I mean
that's what it says.
For the purposes of that law, that is how COVID-19 is defined, and it references Wuhan, China, which, I was kind of surprised about, but
and the point is if you agree with that, then we can, there's people who will agree with that, but then there's other, if you don't, then clearly there's parts of the law that you don't agree on either, just like there's parts of this bill that I don't agree on. And when I say law, I mean bill, which was, signed, it was it was ultimately amended, but that was, just my question there. It just is very odd as to why that would be put in there. So, again, there's very strange things, unprecedented times, and there's very strange things going on here. I appreciate you taking the time. I appreciate you allowing the time.
Of course.
I appreciate Dr. Pasquarella saying last week that I deserved an answer. That meant so much to me, and I really do appreciate that. That meant a lot. Thank you, board, for listening.
Absolutely.
And entertaining this. Good luck. We are behind you, and we hope that you are going to see your way through this. So thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else?
Member Economy Borough. So I'm here for a few things. One, I want to say thank you for hiring the appropriate number of football coaches. So I'm glad to see that we got some new coaches, and I think we'll see some positive things. I think it'll just take time that they'll all come together. So thank you for that after how many times of not having enough coaches. The second reason why I'm here is quarantining. When students are being asked to quarantine, a concern of mine is my son was asked to quarantine and he was absent for 2 days. He was marked truant for those days. He did get online and his teachers had told him they would not be teaching online. There was no homework, anything given. Then he comes back to school on a Friday and he's given a test. Doesn't do well on the test. My concern is these kids are bringing home laptops. Why is there no work being done? He was asked to quarantine because he was possibly exposed, which I knew at the time he was negative. He was completely vaccinated, but it wasn't the amount of time. I'm upset over that, over the education our kids are receiving now when they're being asked to quarantine. As an involved parent, concerned parent, my kid's education is very important to me. When I see that he's being marked truant, it is a concern for me because these are the years that count, 9th through 12th grade. And I've continued to impress this on him continuously. So where are we? Why are kids being marked truant when they're being asked to quarantine?
So on a couple of the points that you made, if you'd like me to answer that.
Please.
Okay. So the first one, when folks are being quarantined, to the best of my knowledge, when you're actually being quarantined, you should be allowed to log on.
Okay.
We are not allowing people to choose to log on just day to day or for a general sickness. The idea is that you're supposed to be staying in the program for either a lengthy amount of time, or 9 weeks, or at least a lengthy time, not day to day. That being said, if you are being quarantined, you should be given the opportunity to log on. As far as truancy, I'm not sure why exactly, if you were being quarantined, that you would be marked truant. I'll have to do a little bit more research, to be honest with you. I don't know if we're just a little bit behind, or I don't know how we're looking at those as far as excused or unexcused. I would assume that, I don't want to assume, but I would take that probably they're being marked that way, and then it is often where people go back and look at those items. So the people that are taking attendance may or may not know that those folks are being quarantined, and they may need to be addressed. I mean, they will know, but the timeliness of that, because the first order of business when these types of things come in is to quarantine the folks. Sometimes that's happening at night, and then getting the list and making sure those people know that. So I would encourage you to reach out to your building principal if you're seeing those things occurring where you're being marked truant. That's kind of where I'm at. I know that there are rules and regulations as far as whether you missed and how many excuse absences you get and those types of things, but generally speaking, without having all the information, you could provide that to me or your building principal to look into, and we can go from there. Generally speaking, I would assume that a lot of times people are marked until they get the excuses or they get word as to why the child was absent.
So my other part then is, like, that first day that he had to quarantine, of course I had to run and get him tested, which we spent hours at a Med Express. And by the time we got home and he got to log on, he's not getting any work. The next day I woke him up and I'm like, get up, get online, get on there. I don't want you missing anything. He's on there, but he wasn't given any work. He just basically sat there. So that is a concern for me.
Okay.
Because then when he came back the next day, he's giving a test and his grade goes down. Which, me being a concerned parent, how I find this out is, I'm checking his grades online. I'm checking his attendance. If there's something my son is not doing and needs to be doing, I want to know about it, and I'm on him. And he's not a bad kid. He's not, let me tell you, if he did do something, I'd be on him. But I am concerned when I see that. They have laptops. They should be given work online if they're missing it in school and they're being asked to quarantine. That's a concern. So
For quarantine, I agree with the statement you made.
thank you. Thank you.
And if it didn't happen, that could just come down to making sure that we get links out to the appropriate people. Again, the only thing I could tell you is there are some times where we're finding out this information, then having to figure out who are close contacts, and then people are trying to make these calls later in the evening. I'm not saying I'm trying to talk about your specific case, but I know those kind of things happen. Then the next thing is we have to get the login information and let the teachers know that. So it's kind of a thing that could take a little bit of time, but in general, we want to do that as soon as possible for students being quarantined so they have access to their education.
Okay. Thank you. So the next reason why I'm here is, this is the biggest reason. As you all know, my biggest concern was at middle school and the issues that have occurred in that middle school. We now don't have a principal. I understand you guys have hired one, not sure when that person is starting. Now we don't have a school resource officer is my understanding. My understanding that he was told not to come back because he won't wear a mask. And the reason why he won't wear a mask, which I'm feeling it right now, is my glasses are fogging up. He wears glasses. It can hinder your vision. This man is a stellar officer. He has gone above and beyond for this district and this community. The kids love and adore him. The one thing, he knows all those kids in that building. He gets down to their level. He interacts with them. He jokes with them. He arms wrestles with them at lunchtime. When my youngest son comes home and tells me about Officer Woods no longer being in there and how upset he is, it's concerning to me, especially given the circumstances that have occurred in the middle school. I would like to know, do we have a safety plan for that middle school? Do you have a safety plan for the middle school? Shouldn't each building have their own safety plan?
Say it again.
Shouldn't each building have their own safety plan? Does the middle school have a safety plan?
I mean, specific to what?
If something should occur there. If an incident would occur there.
Yeah, so how you would exit or follow different protocols if this happens or that happens in a state of an emergency? Is that what you're asking?
Not necessarily in a state of emergency. Example was the huge fight that occurred which I was really shocked by and really upset over, that occurred after Easter break, spring break. The students just came back to the school and you have a big brawl in the hallway. You had students climbing on this officer's back, punching him in the head. What's the safety plan there? Where is the safety plan? We don't have an officer now in that building. There needs to be some things in place, because here's what I'm upset over. What I'm hearing is these kids aren't suffering enough consequences. And we keep bringing them back to the district and bringing them back. That's what's given this district a bad name. And I'm all about giving kids second chances. I'm all about every student and their individual rights. My concern is we keep doing this, and it is a safety issue. And I really hope now Officer Woods needs to be back in that middle school. It's at Meady's, it's at many of these other parents at ease. He's a stellar officer. If he's vaccinated, he shouldn't have to wear a mask. I'm sorry, there's got to be an exemption or something that can be done for that. It's a safety issue. I mean, he has a loaded weapon on his side.
Look, I'm going to have Solicitor Turnbull answer for us here.
So there has not been either a student or a staff member who has been removed from any of our buildings for noncompliance. The district has communicated, very similar requests to anyone who has asked for an exemption, whether it's a student or a staff member. And so we have asked and we have encouraged those types of requests from anyone who should need it. And to date, we have not received a completed exemption request.
So all he has to do is get an exemption request saying in regards to, it could be the safety of,
So the
for his
district,
safety.
the district has communicated to him and to Economy Borough what is necessary, which is similar to anyone else, student or adult in our buildings. And we've expressed in writing our hope that we can continue to work together to perhaps initiate a dialogue of some sort. There's a lot of willingness over on the side of the district to do so. And we've also asked, in the event that if for whatever reason we're at an impasse without even talking, then we've asked that Economy Borough assign another officer as soon as possible. We have not received a response.
And can I answer? I'm sorry, don't mean to disrupt. But my understanding is Officer Woods is the only officer that has the specific training and certification that is needed for schools. That Economy Borough does not have another officer with that certification or that training.
And I don't know that to be true or not to be true, simply because there hasn't been an engagement yet. I hope that that changes with the borough. The district believes that it is important to have an SRO. And just like when we work through those exemptions with kiddos, if they need it, we would absolutely do the same thing with any adult. And there are, as I kind of addressed earlier, there's A through G. There's that many exemption or opportunities. I just need someone to justify it and to point us to where that is and why. And if so, then we've done our due diligence and treated everyone fairly and equitably, and we'd work through it. But there needs to be more than what has been received so far.
So we don't have an officer there now. He's not there now. What are the plans in place for the middle school with not having a school resource officer in there?
So as any time when an officer is out, then, the building principal would contact the police department if there was an issue.
So who do we have up there? Because I know we don't have a principal. We have the assistant principal. From what I understand, has Turk been there every day?
Yes.
What I understand is that he's been having to go back and forth between here with being the athletic director and then also being assistant principal here, assistant principal there.
He's been primarily there until we get the person in the position that we hired as the head middle school principal.
Okay.
He's reported there every day.
So
I'm not saying he hasn't come down here for athletics after school. He has, but he's been positioned there.
Okay. My other thing is, so if an incident should occur, then they are to call 911 in that building? If another altercation breaks out?
I mean, if an incident occurs, it depends at what level. The first thing is they should try to get the principal. If they felt that something raises to the level that they should call 911, then that's what somebody would do. But if you're seeing something, the first thing would be to try to de-escalate the situation and try to call the building principal. But if it raised to a level where there was a concern at any point, then you would call the police. That's what you would do, correct?
And my other question is, we still don't have metal detectors or anything like that in that building. When's the last time we've done backpack checks? Have just done the unannounced check? I'm sorry, in today's day, you're still hearing about incidents that are occurring in schools. It is a safety issue for me, especially given the number of incidents that have occurred in that middle school. I don't ever want to see anything happen there. I don't ever want to get that phone call. I don't ever want to be a parent called. I'll tell you right now, I'm not one parent you're not going to want to call if my kid's in the wrong place at the wrong time. And there's not the appropriate support in that building. It is very concerning to me. Safety is a concern. So, thank you. I want answers. I just want to know that our kids are safe in that building. And I want Officer Woods back.
Good evening. Kristen Paxton, 144 Hickory Drive, Economy. I wanted to jump up here next because my comments echo the previous resident. The fact that if there were a situation in that school where Officer Woods needed to draw his weapon and he couldn't do so safely because of his mask, that's his exemption. That should be all the exemption that officer needs. There are countless stories that demonstrate his leadership contributions and positive influence throughout our school and community. I challenge anyone to find another representative who has done so at that level. In fact, just 2 years ago, he was given an award for outstanding efforts in juvenile justice enforcement and education. Here's what Ambridge Area School District had to say at that time. Quote, Officer Woods has been a staple in the Ambridge Area Middle School for the past 6 years. Not only has he served as our resource officer, but also as a mentor, teacher, and friend. We are proud to have Officer Woods as an integral part of our team at the middle school. Congratulations, Officer Woods. Thank you for your service. End quote. Not to be snarky, Should that be amended to, we are proud to have Officer Woods as an integral part of our team, as long as he's wearing a mask? Like the last resident said, I am very concerned about safety at our school. I hear about the fights. And as bad as those are, and as dangerous as those are, it's truly the unthinkable is where my mind goes. What you see on TV, what you hear on the news, it can happen here. And I'm not hearing a clear enough plan that would be enacted quickly enough to de-escalate the situation and keep as many kids safe as possible. I'm simply not hearing it. So I'm not satisfied with the answers that we're being given. I hope that everyone realizes that this could possibly be the only line of defense that those children have, and it has been removed. That is not acceptable. So I echo those questions that have been asked. We deserve to know when this position will be filled with an equally qualified officer, and if that can't be done, we deserve to know when and if Officer Woods will be reinstated. Thank you.
Solicitor Turnbull, could you answer for, he was not removed from the position, am I correct?
He removed himself. I mean, to be frank about it. So it would be certainly I believe it would be the district's preference for that not to be the case. And again, the stands ready to address any concerns, kind of go through that same process very expeditiously. I mean, none of that necessarily has to take any great amount of time, but it will begin with a choice or an intention on the part of a party that is not us.
So I can appreciate what you're saying. I would just ask that whatever these loopholes and steps are being required are not unreasonable, and that every effort is made in constant communication and outreach to express that that is the desired outcome and not let this go for too much longer. Because again, as the previous resident stated, there's no one there now. So that can't continue. But I appreciate your response.
Thank you.
Hi, Mary Green, Economy. I really don't have questions. Well, I do. So I know that there are at least 6 other districts that are allowing the parents to parent their children and make a decision on masks. So who here in our local school district, who ultimately makes the decision where parent exceptions are not accepted?
So I guess what we do right now, just to be transparent on the masking issue, I mean, this mandate came down. I think you've heard today from other residents who are reading in our school solicitor that they're continuing to try to clarify something that's not clear. We'll reiterate that not completely clear, but I think we also heard about the idea that the board members and the administration and so on and so forth, if not enforced, would sacrifice, immunity and all of these things that could cause us to be sued or lose our job. I'm not making excuses. I'm just saying they're trying to strengthen up what they put forward. I'm also not here to say that I think that I have an opinion one way or another. I know some people are in favor of masking and some aren't. I've been throughout this, which I wish, for all of us, it would end soon, and it hasn't. But in my entire time being here, it's been COVID. Coming back, I should say. But I guess, to be honest with you, what happens is we're trying to read this in conjunction with the solicitor to make sure that we are following the mandate that's been put in front of us in conjunction with what we have to do, because prior to this Board of Education, my recommendation aside or not, decided that everyone would have the option to wear masks, and we know that. That was taken away from somebody outside of this board. I'm not sticking up for them, and it was whether I recommended something or not didn't matter. That was the decisions made, and that's what we did. So to answer your question, what we're doing is taking these types of things in, and actually, if you think about it, last week, I made the statement, and the solicitor concurred that it would have to go through the 504 process. We talked about that. And there was questions about whether that was in there or not. And in the most recent correspondence, at least from PD, I believe it did indicate, the solicitor can jump in from what you read, that it would be through the 504. So we're going to go through that, and then if we need to, I'm just going to be transparent. I'm going to ask our district solicitor to review the exemptions to make sure that legally, that we are following the mandate. Because to me, I'm trying to do so in the best way possible to be fair and consistent to everybody. But in the same idea, I'm not, a medical doctor or a member of the team that's able to do that. So in a 504 process in general, you get a medical reason why often, and based upon that, then the team reviews and determines if that is a reason acceptable to make certain accommodations. And these cases now, we're reviewing them with the solicitor. So I'm not dodging your question or your answer. We're working it up through our principals, our special education department. Ultimately, if we can't work it out, coming to me and me asking the solicitor, because we want to make sure that we're doing this in a fair and consistent way for everybody. And, we also want to make sure that we're not doing anything that would be in violation that would put the district or anyone else at risk. And it's difficult for all of us. And so I appreciate your frustration. I also appreciate, the kind words that were stated in appreciation today, that we're trying to answer your questions to the best of our ability, and information, not from you, but from another resident, and it just keeps coming out. So we're doing the best that we can. So to answer your question, ultimately, I guess you could say it rises up through administration, it goes to me, and often I'm in conjunction with the solicitor to try to determine this, because between this mandate and how we're trying to read it and everything that we have going on, it's not an easy decision to make to say whether or not somebody qualifies. It's just tough.
Okay. So there was a lot of talk about measurement. How are we measuring? Because if everybody read the order of the acting secretary, which I'm sure all of you have, right? It states in there that the CDC estimates that the Delta variant is predominant strain, right? Can everybody agree to that? That's what she writes.
I don't have it in front of me, but I believe you. Yes,
that's what she wrote. Okay.
Yes.
So from 8/16 to 9/8, positive cases, 27, 0 to 4. This is in the entire county. Okay, 27 cases. In the entire county, from 5 to 18, it's 264 cases. And according to the 2010 census, we have over 32,000, 0 to 18. So my point is number one, we're not in a state of emergency. A mandate is not a law. I'm also a business owner, so I practice. They've threatened me as well with grants and money, and I'm sure that that's what everything is going to come down to. But the point is, we're not using science like everybody pushes for, and it seems to me like ultimately, everybody's worried about their job, I get it, but the thing is, you're talking 300 cases out of 32,000 kids, 0 to 18. So I don't know what we're basing this off of, because these other 6 counties, and those are the only ones that I researched that will accept parental okays to not wear a mask. Your kid wants to wear one, fine. Mine doesn't, fine. Actually, mine prefers to. So I think it should be parent choice. You're taking our choices away. There were lots of kids wearing them for those first 2 weeks. What changed in the 3rd week of school? All of a sudden, it's the Delta variant strain? Well, guess what? From what you can read on the PA Health Department, they're sending 10 to 35 specimens. We don't even have a process for this testing for the Delta variant. So Pennsylvania, as a state, is sending 10 to 35 specimens to the CDC to test for the variant, the Delta, which everybody is concerned about. and which is why the acting secretary put this in here. So I guess we'll just wait to hear. I mean, I don't know what the push is because there's no science behind it except we're being threatened. I'm being threatened as well with grant money, and I'm sure that's part of your reason too. So I guess I'll just wait to hear. And ultimately, it's the solicitors.
Ultimately, I would say that we're reviewing that with the solicitor to hear the rights of the exception, and then she's going to help guide me through the law to make the decision. I mean, ultimately, I'm not going to sit here and say it's not mine, but.
So as a parent, you say you're going to guide her through the decision. So as a parent, if somebody writes a note, then you're going to look at that. But right now, I'm taking it as everybody wears a mask or you don't come to school.
Right now, just to clarify, what you said, what was the difference in a couple of weeks, and I know that might not have been a question, but I think the mandate that we didn't put out is the difference. And based upon that mandate, what I'm saying is you could go through the 504 process in which the special education and the building principal and those folks are going to look at that. And if they have questions, they're going to refer those questions up to the solicitor, to me, and then to the solicitor to try to work through that, to make sure we're doing that in compliance. So I'm trying to answer your question.
If you have children in advanced classes, why would they need a 504 if they don't have any medical reasons other than I'm her parent and that's my decision if she wears a mask or not?
I don't think that I mean, I don't want to keep going back.
I know, but these other districts have. That's my point. So somebody in our district is pulling it.
I got you. I can't answer why they're doing that. I can't answer that for you. I don't know why another district decided to not follow the mandate or what exactly their procedures were. I'm just telling you.
Well, I have a call into all the solicitors for those counties, so I'm going to find out why.
Okay.
Thanks.
Yeah. And President Fisher is just asking me to clarify, so not everyone who ends up going through this process, so it's an individualized inquiry, really, and so it's initiated in a manner that's similar to the 504 process. Not everyone ends up with a 504 plan, but we make sure we're certain when we treat it that way that we don't miss a child under our child find obligations. So I'll give one example. There was a student who presented with, who's recovering from pneumonia. The doctor provided a medical note saying that for the next 2 weeks, student cannot wear a mask. We work through, and this is depersonalized, and I don't even think it's this district, but we work through that. The student's going to wear a face shield for 2 weeks, and then we'll check in and see kind of what it looks like at the end of 2 weeks and what medical stuff there is. So it is not formulaic, truly, in any way. We work through each of those requests. They receive, all the attention and the care that they deserve. And then on the backside, we kind of figure out what the most appropriate thing is based on the mandate and the information provided.
And is it fair to say, just before the next person speaks, I think this is an important component that everyone understands, to be honest, that not everyone that goes and enters into that process will necessarily be granted the exception.
No, and probably many do not. But other interventions are kind of talked about, those face shields, extra
Not saying
mask
they won't.
breaks. But we try to meet everyone where they are and physically. I mean, when we're talking about medical exemptions and what's possible for them. Yes, ma'am.
My name is Cindy Wargo from Economy Borough. I have a question I have is your COVID standards as far as when someone has to go get tested. A child has allergies, sinus infections, or any other symptoms. As soon as they complain that they have a runny nose, you're home. You can't keep sending these kids home to get tested all the time for COVID, especially if you have a sinus infection, the jab that clotting up your nose, that doesn't help. I don't understand why someone that has to be sent home, because I would love to know if there was quarantines for the regular so-called flu, because you're having the same symptoms almost for this. Yet, I don't understand. Okay, and as far as, explain to me why the kids have to be sent home if they complain about a headache, a runny nose, or a cough, or anything like that. and they have to go get tested before they're allowed to come back.
I mean, to explain that to you, I mean, simply, again, I stated this earlier, and I'm saying this with all sincerity. You know, myself and Mr. King, you know, we're not medical doctors. We're following the recommendation of what the Department of Health is going to tell us to do. If you present those symptoms, they're asking that you be sent home and tested on the given days as outlined that they ask you for in order to come back and come back to school. There are rules for vaccinated and unvaccinated folks. I understand your component of where you're at. There are some things, sometimes, if you have something from a medical doctor that indicates that the one symptom that you had is because of, example, maybe migraines. You didn't say that, I don't think. I'm using one as an example, and we know that and have that in file, and you have no other symptoms. It's something that we may be able to consider and talk to the health department. But in large part, if you present these symptoms, the rules are basically that you would be quarantined until you've gotten the test on the appropriate days.
I have a grandson that has been going through allergy shots for 2 years. And this is an allergy season, but he's being sent home.
Understand.
And it doesn't make sense. He's missing school, and they keep getting jabbed up his nose all the time. Someone's making a lot of money with all these testing. And it doesn't make sense. I mean, no offense, but do we lose common sense? You're saying you're following the mandates. There has to be some common sense in here, too. It can't be just mandates that you have to, everything, you have to follow exactly. Because if in the very beginning, when this all started, kids were not susceptible to this. They were the least susceptible to get this. And as far as the other resident comment about how many kids have had a 300 out of 30-some thousand in the district, in the county, what's the percentage of that for those kids? And for those 300, you're making the rest of the kids suffer to wear a mask? If they get the COVID, I would not wish anyone to die from it, but they would be sick just like the regular flu, or sick for maybe a week or two if you had the regular so-called flu. But you're making the kids suffer mentally, socially, because if they don't do what they're supposed to do, you can have other kids bullying them. But that's acceptable. And I don't understand how that is acceptable, because you're following a mandate. That's not a law. And so-called, you're saying that you're not a doctor, but you're following the Secretary of Health, who's not a doctor. Explain to me the difference between you and her.
I'm just saying that I don't have the authority to make those types of decisions.
She doesn't either. No offense. No offense.
I'm not going to debate that with you. I'm just saying that's what was presented to me in my position.
But I would like to have a district to fight for the kids. Come on, fight for our kids. Can you stand up to these people and say, come on, show me your science. Show me the proof of what this is doing. Come on, you guys can do that.
I think as always, you know, and I'll just try to say this, I understand your point of view, and there's also a point of view on the other side, and I'll be honest and transparent too, that I've been nervous about it and don't want to see anyone get ill. I've made recommendations to try to keep people safe to the best of the information that's provided to me. So I'm going to be honest with you on that side too. I don't know. When I say I personally, I mean, I have a doctorate in education. I'm not a medical doctor. So I'm referring and going based upon what I'm hearing based upon the professionals in that field and trying to adhere to those types of recommendations when possible. Our plan says that when they are just simply recommendations, and whether those recommendations are from me personally, and I thought that, the board has many times gone with what I've said and many times not gone with what I've said too, and listened to both sides. But as of recent, they were allowing people to choose whatever they wanted, as we know, right? Whether you wanted to wear one or not. And then recently that decision was taken out of their hands from what I see coming down from the state as a mandate. The solicitor's kind of spoken to that. I mean, I don't want to get into debate on that. I respect everybody's opinion on the issue, and I surely don't have all the answers. but I'm trying to do my very best to keep kids safe, and that goes on both ways, both sides. And we're going to continue to do the best we can. But me personally, as the superintendent, I can only speak for myself. If I'm given a mandate, I'm going to follow that mandate. And I would encourage you, as was mentioned before, if you have a different opinion of that, you can advocate. But I'm not the one that can end the mandate. I didn't put the mandate.
But can you fight against it?
Well, just...
No, and that's what I'm asking for. Can you guys I mean, I know, go by, everyone keeps saying science. Well, tell the mandate, give the people that are giving the mandate, give them the facts, the science facts. That's all. You're not going to have 100% proof of health. There's no way of any illness. And a vaccine is not the exact cure-all either, because that hasn't even been proven, and there have been deaths caused by the vaccine.
Okay, ma'am, thank you. We're going to need to move on if we have other people that need to speak, but thank you. Thank you for your time.
Lisa Patton, Economy Bureau. I just have a question. It's not about the masks, but can you guys explain? So for those of us parents who are following, if your child is exhibiting the symptoms of COVID and you keep your child home, okay? So you're doing the right thing. You're trying to keep your child from, if your child has COVID, from affecting another student. But then they cannot log in. And I know that the login, you guys have it set up now, that if the kid is quarantined, they should be able to log in. But what about us parents who are trying to do the right thing? We're not taking advantage of it, we're just trying to do the right thing, we're trying to make sure we're not spreading. For example, and I know Denise knows this, but the 5th grade class in economy, the last 2 weeks, they've all been hitting with something, but we can't log in. So we're doing the right thing, and unfortunately, and it's not going to be me, but there's going to be people going, well, if my kid isn't, my kid has a sniffle, my kid has a cough, they're getting sent home, they can't get the work, they're getting marked absent, eventually those 10 days add up quick. And there's going to be people that are going to be like, go to school, just go. So I want to know, is there anything that we can do for these kids? I know there's a percentage of students that take advantage of it, and I get that. But then there's a lot of us that follow the rules. And I just want to know what can we do to help these students out so that they're not going past their 10 days and the parents aren't getting the call from the truancy officer. I just want that to be talked over and addressed and seeing if there's something that we can figure out. Thank you.
Similar answer as before. If the child is exhibiting symptoms of COVID-19, they would go through their nurse principal, and Mr. King would notify them at that given point, and they should have been allowed, and if they aren't, you could let me know. They should have been able to log in. So if that's not happening, then I need to know that. If your child...
I'm not saying it's not always happening, but...
It's not happening, Dr. Pastorella.
Well, there was some confusion early on, but I'm going to repeat myself because I'm on camera and you're all listening to this, so I want to make sure I'm clear. We can't let somebody who's out and maybe just didn't feel well, had a dentist appointment or what have you for one day, we're not going to have them log in and out. They're coming back the next day.
Right.
If you're exhibiting, that's my opinion, that's what we agreed to, where it says it's supposed to be almost for 9 weeks. It's not guaranteed in the contract that it's going to be for a whole 9 weeks. We have the right to go back and say, no, they've changed their mind. But it can't be day to day. That being said, if you're saying you're doing the right thing because your student is exhibiting symptoms of COVID-19, then you should be notifying your building principal, Mr. King, and the nurse. And if that's the case, you should be receiving a login. As I said earlier, does that happen the very next morning? I hope so. That should be the goal. But it's difficult when you have a lot of folks that were being quarantined to get everybody their login and go through that process. If you're saying that you kept your kid home for the amount of days that you're talking about and you were on day 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 and you still didn't have a login, that's an issue. We need to be made aware of that.
Well, my son stayed home and my daughter stayed home. I'm vaccinated, okay? But they could not log in. And so I just want to know what is.
I'm glad you brought it to my attention, and I want to make sure that everyone understands. If you're staying home for COVID-19 symptoms, or you're a close contact of somebody with COVID-19, you should have the opportunity to log in for those days. And we should be trying to do that as soon as possible. So if that's not happening, I know there was some discrepancy or trying to really understand how that went, so bear with us. I apologize if that happened early on, because we were working through how we would get there. But that is the goal. But if you're just out for a day, no, we're not going to go one day at a time. We're not going to do that. And actually, if you choose to go that route, that's a decision that somebody made. It should be really for 9 weeks. It doesn't have to be a full 9 weeks, but it's not day to day. Does that make sense?
And I know it's not day to day, but I do know that when I had inquired to the teachers, that they were told that they are not allowed to do it. I think the clarification is more so that needs to go out for the parents and for the teachers again, just to make sure that we have it. Because did I call the principal and say, hey, my kid has this symptom, this symptom, this symptom, I want logged in?
If you did, and you said it's this symptom, and this symptom, and it was qualified as a COVID-19 quarantine, then you would either have to remain out for the total amount of quarantine, or on a certain day you'd have to get tested 5, 6, or 7 to come back day 8.
Yeah.
If you said that my kid is just out today for whatever reason that is, a dentist, I'm making that up, I don't know, any type of appointment, then we're not logging you in because you should be back tomorrow. So that is the difference. So if you're a close contact or you identify yourself as somebody who is possible COVID-19, is going to get tested or remain quarantined for the amount of time, then you should get a login as soon as possible.
Well, unfortunately, every symptom of anything, just like...
I agree, they were saying.
Everything is a symptom of
So pretty
COVID.
much, yes.
Allergies, stomach bug, everything's a symptom.
I'm with you.
And you don't want to be like, oh my goodness, I got to go get my kid tested, but in the back of your mind, you're going, well, maybe I should.
Then I think you're doing the right thing. If you have those symptoms, you let your principal know, they'll let Mr. King know and the nurse know, and then it's going to be identified that he will give you a return date or a return date if you get a negative test. And in that time, we want to try to get the child logged on during that quarantine time as soon as we possibly can.
And do they have to get double, because I heard of another student that had to get double COVID test negative in order to come back for allergies? I know it's a hard decision.
I'm not sure what that is. Sometimes I could tell you some people did not, maybe didn't hear it quickly. They took their kid right away to get tested, and then it wasn't on day 5, 6, or 7, so then that one didn't count. I don't know. Okay. I can't answer what I don't know. I'm just saying that that's how we're handling it. If you are quarantined, you would get access to log in, and if you're not, then I want to know about it.
Okay. And let me just say, I don't want to be in your shoes. You guys have a lot to figure out, but I thank you for what you're doing. I just wanted to bring that to your attention. So if you didn't know that this was, just to make sure that we're all on the same page. Because I know
if you think about it, it's very easy to get confused on the situation because you're keeping your kid home because they're sick, but if they're only out for one day, they come back. However, some of those symptoms might be like COVID-19, and then they'd have to quarantine. So it is, as we've been talking about all night, it is a difficult situation. So I just encourage you to reach out to your nurse building principal, Mr. King, to get that information as to when you're coming back. And if you're not getting a login when you are quarantined for one of those reasons, either because your child has symptoms or you're a close contact, then let your building principal know. And if they tell you no, then let me know, and then I will hear the whole story and decide whether or not you should have access.
And I'll relay the information to any of the parents that are inquiring.
I appreciate it.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Stacy Chalupiak, 300 Tyro Road, Baden. I have a question for the board members only. Sorry, Lady Solicitor, you don't get to talk this time. I want to hear from all you guys. My question to you guys is, have any of you ever been asked to sign a non-disclosure document? Oh, you're just biting. You want to say something. Anybody? No. No. Okay. Just wanted to know. So could you talk in your microphone and say that you haven't? Have any of you on the board ever been asked to sign a non-disclosure document?
No.
A little bit louder.
No.
Thank you. Okay. Okay, so my next thing. I don't understand why. I guess it's a question. Why is the mask issue not on the agenda? So like when I look at this paper and I look at the website and it just has a bunch of this stuff about salaries and how much money you're taking from us and blah, blah, blah. There's an issue about masks, obviously, a lot. And I will point out also people who are not here, who are afraid, that should be speaking up. So why is that not on your agenda?
So the board, I'll speak to that. The board voted on in June and passed the health and safety plan, which addressed the masking, that said, in general, I don't have it in front of me, but in general, it said that if it is mandated by the state, federal government, that they would follow that and mask that, and if not, it would be at the recommendation of myself, but ultimately their decision. And at that meeting, when there was not a mandate, when they approved that, they said masking would be optional from that point forward. And so really that's where we're at. We approved that. They did vote on that. There's nothing more to vote on because this is a masking mandate. So there was no new decision to be. I'm sorry?
It's not a law, it's just a mandate.
I thought I said mandate, but.
No, just
yeah, I understand.
simply saying.
Okay, if I did, I didn't mean to. I meant to say mandate, not law. I thought I said mandate.
You did, I'm just simply saying.
Oh, okay. Anyway, I'm just saying that's why it's not on there, because the vote was taken, it was made public, and we're really not changing anything. If they wanted to change something in the health and safety plan, they could do that. But at this given point, that's what we voted, that's what we've been following, and we're continuing to follow that. So that's why it wasn't on the agenda. However, underneath public comment, in the old and new business, people could bring up whatever it is they want, and they are doing that, so that leads itself to some discussion.
Okay, I guess why I'm asking is for the people at home who are too cowardly to be here to speak up, because I know there's more parents in the Ambridge School District that care about this issue, but they're too cowardly or they're just too busy, whatever, I don't know what it is. To them, they think everything's okay. So I think it would be good to have it on here that every time we have a meeting, we're talking about masks. And if they saw that, maybe they'd be like, yeah, there's other people that feel like that too. Do you understand? Like, it's just seeing this is just like mumbo jumbo.
All the meetings are recorded, and the next day they're visible.
Oh, no, they're not. They were not recorded and put on the next day. They were just put on last night. On YouTube?
Can you answer, Mrs. Miller? Do you know?
They should be put on the next day. We have a new person doing the recording. He's brand new to it, so I don't know if he maybe has some difficulties putting it on, but they should be posted the next day. And
it wasn't the next day.
Well,
they were being posted.
Normal protocol is the day after.
Okay.
And we apologize if that was the case, because we weren't aware of it.
Well, the reason why I'm saying it is for the person that's at home that just doesn't know what goes on here, okay? Like, if they saw that other parents were speaking up and other parents cared about having their kids muzzled, whether the choice was taken away from them like it is being, maybe they would come here and voice their opinion too. So I think it is important. All right, so the other thing is, what difference does it make on exemptions? Say the exemption goes through, my kid has asthma and he can't breathe, and he gets an excuse. So what's the difference in that kid not having a mask on versus a kid that just doesn't want a mask on because it's their God-given right to breathe fresh air? What's the difference? They're still spreading the same germs if they have germs. What's stopping that? Anybody? Anybody? You guys are really quiet.
Stacy, I think it would be a good decision for you to reach out to our local legislators.
I and I do.
Wait, please let me finish, Stacy, please. I appreciate that you guys are doing this, and we hear what you are all saying, but we voted to give parents the choice. It was taken from us. So while I appreciate what you're saying, we also have mandates we have to follow, and we have regulations. We need you to go voice these concerns to our local legislators, to Governor Wolf,
we have
who
tried.
also made that. Thank you, I appreciate that you're trying, but to keep telling us that we're cowards and beating us up, it's not kind.
I know.
And it's not who you are. I know who you are. Like, you're not someone that's coming at us, and that's what you're doing, and it's just, we are trying our best. And I want people to hear that. Like, we can only do so much, and we need your help. If we want change, we need government change at this point. That's my point. That's my point.
Exactly.
And we're happy to listen, guys. We're staying, you know, I want to thank my board because I made the decision without even asking them to keep it open so we could hear everybody, and we appreciate and hear you. But if you could, you know, if you could just be respectful over it.
I am respectful. I'm just very mad as hell about this. I'm mad.
And I respect that, Stacy. I respect that you are angry over it, and everybody has different opinions, but we are trying to do our best to do what's right and good for these kids.
I'm just going to keep coming every week.
And you're more than welcome.
I will be
You
here
are more than welcome.
because my kids are not wearing masks. I'm done.
Emily Maddox, 216 Ridgeway Drive, Baden. Ma'am, lovely to meet you tonight. It will be difficult for me to identify her outside because I can't see most of her face. Obviously, if I were around her often, that would be different. As with our teachers in buildings, with our children, they get used to it, they figure out who the kids are. Under section 3, one of the exceptions is when necessary to confirm the individual's identity. Sorry. Sorry. And I would just ask everyone in our local community to consider the 8 references that the order has. Is that sufficient data for our community to make decisions for our kids? You guys gave us autonomy at the beginning, and we are grateful for that. We're all in a rock and a hard place. Ultimately, I could choose to keep my kid home and homeschool him. I am grateful that my children remain joyful going to school, and that's because of great teachers and the great things you guys are doing in our school district. And how long will this go on? We all feel this frustration, but digging through the CDC, the World Health Organization, is the data sufficient that they're recommending for this? And I know just subbing in the schools, when precious little ones have their whole faces covered all day, this will do something to some psychologically as this goes on. Do our schools have a continuum of PPE, like the face shields and like the little chin clear things, so that as these issues unfold, we're prepared with a continuum to offer students and staff, perhaps some students with speech and language difficulties, or our little 3 and 4-year-olds that are just learning how to talk, that maybe if this is going to be around any bit of time, we need to start looking into that. As well as what's the status with our air filters in our schools? Are they HEPA standard? I'm not going to pretend to know all the safety things around that. I do know that good air filtration helps with a lot of this, mitigating it, better than perhaps the masks. And I fully respect everyone's choice on how to keep their family healthy. Class sizes, can we consider that moving forward? As some of our elementary class sizes are rather large just for differentiation of learning purposes. So that would also help with health and safety being first and foremost, because before we learn, we have to feel healthy and safe. Sorry, that's it. Yeah.
Which elementary school do your kids go to
Economy.
elementary? Economy. Okay, thank you. Anybody else? No? I'm sorry, ma'am. We're gonna try to close it off here. I want to thank everybody for their patience tonight and in attending. We ran longer than what we thought, but I felt it was important, as I think the rest of the board would be in support, and our solicitor, that we hear you. And we do hear you. And we do hear you and appreciate your concerns. And we'll try to work with you as much as we possibly can, okay? Does anybody else on the board have anything they want to add in before we close?
Kathy, I have a comment. I sit on a county board with 13 other school districts. Last month, we had a conversation on what school districts were going to do regarding the masks. The majority of the districts in Beaver County agreed to go with the mask. There were a few that left the choice up to the parents. One of those school districts was Beaver, and I know that board member quite well. We had some conversation on it. So I was kind of shocked the other day when I turned the news on, and Beaver Area School District not only was on the local news, but it made national news because of the extreme amount of cases, positive COVID cases they had. 60 students, 7 staff members. They had to shut down their high school and Dutch Ridge Road, which houses grades 3 through 6. So they are now currently virtual. We don't want to go there. The board does not want to have to go back to virtual learning. So if the choice becomes wear the mask or we're heading back to virtual, I think it's pretty clear cut. And the other thing that I want everybody to know is last year when the COVID was going on, the district did form a committee. It was made up of staff members, teachers, some board members, and some members from the public. And we met every single month, and every month at the board meeting regarding issues that we talked about or voted on, Dr. Pascarella presented that information in public meetings every single month. We did have our health and safety plan this year. It also was presented at a public meeting. Thank you. If you go back in the minutes or in the video, I'm sure you'll find it. I think the goal here is we are trying to keep your children safe and the staff. So I think you need to understand that too. It's not that we don't hear you, but we have to keep everybody's child safe.
Okay. Thank you for your patience once again. I have a motion on the floor to adjourn.
So moved.
Thank you, Mrs. Keir. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Ms. Pedigo. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Have a great evening.